Good evening and welcome to I'm Listening Live. I'm Listening is a 24/7, 365 initiative that works to both destigmatize mental health and also let you know that we're here and we're listening. We have a great show planned for you, but before we jump into that, I want to just talk about the current political situation. Please know that politics do greatly impact our mental health. Studies show that up to 75% of individuals are reporting feeling an increase in stress and anxiety due to the current political situation. We all watched in horror as the Capitol was stormed. Now that's going to have an impact on our mental health. We're talking about politically induced stress and political anxiety. Those are new diagnoses that we're going to be talking about more as we move forward. Now, there are ways that we can look out for our mental health in difficult political times like we're experiencing right now. The signs that maybe you need to put a little more attention to your mental health is the possibility of weight loss, weight going up, but also weight going down, sleep disturbances, changes in your mood, also your eating patterns, and also maybe an increase in irritability. Those are all signs that you might have what we're calling politically induced stress disorder. Now, the ways that we combat that are, first off, looking at all the different ways that politics are entering our lives. It's important and empowering to know what's going on politically, but we do want to be thoughtful at how much of our day is spent immersing both our psyches, mental health, and our nervous systems in triggering news information. So please track how long you're spending watching news and letting all this enter your mental health. We also want to be thoughtful about who we're talking to about these things. We do want to talk to others, but we want to be thoughtful about not constantly starting or entering conversations that are going to be really dysregulating and highly triggering. We want to be looking out for ourselves in that way. Finally, we want to be focusing on things like fun and pleasure. When we're going through difficult times, it's really important to take a break, but also to focus on all the beneficial and fun things that are still happening in our world. And as always, stay connected. Reach out to other individuals that are supportive, maybe also ones that put a smile on your face or distract you. But we want to have people in our lives that we can turn to because we can't get through this all on our own. We want to now go to our first guest, Dr. Josh Klapow. Welcome back to the show. How have you been?
I've been okay, Chris. I've been okay, all things considered.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I'd like to say that things have been smooth since we last saw you. Unfortunately, they haven't. So looking at a stat today, this is actually very disheartening, not surprising. 70% of people are anxious and have stress over the future of the nation, and 68% are stressed by the current political climate. So last week we all watched a mob storm the Capitol. So talk to us a little bit about the impacts of that on mental health.
Well, I mean, you know this as a psychologist. This is, I hate to say it, it's unprecedented. We have never seen so many layers of stress. And I think that's the most complex and difficult thing to wrap our head around, is that it's layer after layer and it's new stressor after new stressor almost every day. And, so what you're seeing is people kind of hitting the wall. And when I mean hitting the wall, they're just physically exhausted because we know what stress does to the body in addition to the mind. And yet every day there seems to be another new stimulus for them to react to.
Yeah, and you hear people trying to do the grounding and the positive thinking, and we just have to be resilient and get through this difficult time. And then, like you said, it's complicated by having not quite gotten through that, and then something else is added on top of that. So when we talk about the impact that media has, right, because media is the source through which a lot of this is kind of entering our lives and our psyches, how do we maneuver media differently?
Well, you hear all the time about sort of unplugging and walking away and stepping away. And I'm a proponent of that if that works for you. But in my experience, I'm talking to people who are saying, look, every day there's breaking news and I can't just completely unplug. And so really my recommendation is take time to reset or re-regulate, or recalibrate is the term I like to use. That may mean 2 or 3 minutes, Chris, of just stepping back. So it's not necessarily shutting everything down, but stepping back and giving your brain, as well as sort of your whole physiology, time to, as you said, ground. But you don't have to do it for a day. You may need to do it, 6 times every hour so that you are staying engaged and you're not feeling like you're pulling yourself away and there's this desire to be pulled back, because then you create a whole new stressor for yourself.
100%. And it's just good practice anyway, right? We're trying to work on having a little more detachment from that. And I've been practicing that myself because, like yourself, we're doing clinical work, we're doing media. And so even if we would have a break, we're talking about it, it's coming in our own lives. So I had to say to myself, I can't help anyone if I'm not helping myself. So I started putting my phone in a drawer. I noticed that if it was nearby, I would grab it by habit. So I had to literally put it in a drawer and close the drawer.
I think that's a great idea. And, I work with a lot of executives, and they're all in these back-to-back meetings. And they're in the meetings themselves while they're scrolling through on their phone, watching breaking news, and literally not paying attention to things like drinking water, eating, using the restroom. And what I try to convey to people is this is wearing your physical body down. You layer that with a pandemic on top of it, and you're setting yourself up for some big-time problems. And so the idea of constantly grounding yourself, even if you have to do it every 5-10 minutes, is really important. The other thing is, and I use this as a marker, if you're not getting your work done or your school done, if you're finding like you can't interact with people around you, if you are so impaired because you're so engaged, that is a big red flag. You should be able to get most of your work done or your schoolwork. You should be able to do your day-to-day activities. If those things are being impaired, then you are over engaged in the media and in the information around you.
I love that because we all want to feel on top of the news, knowing what's going on can feel empowering, but you're right. There's a threshold where you step into it's working against you. And you're right. It shouldn't have a negative impact on your life. Let's talk quickly about kids. It's something I started bringing into my clinical practice, right? Say, notice that the kids are in the room. They're listening. Don't think they're not listening or paying attention. And even if they're not, they're still absorbing some of that energy and stress that the parents are carrying around. So should our kids be watching the news? And if so, how should we approach that with them?
Well, this is all very developmentally determined. So when you say kids, it's everything from 3-year-olds to 23-year-olds or older, depending on your situation. Obviously, for young children, so much of the information that's coming out that we see, particularly visual, is raw. It's unfiltered. You do need to pay attention. Young kids should not be seeing this. And so under age 6, 7, 8, they should not be seeing this. But let me fast forward to older kids. I'm in this situation now. I've got college kids who are living with me, my kids. We have to be careful as parents that the conversations that we're having are having an impact on our older children as well. So the negativity, the cynicism, all that kind of stuff has an impact even on older children. So pay attention to what you're saying as well. You may not be able to shield your child from the information, but your body language, your verbal interactions have an impact on their emotions as well.
Yeah, well said, well said. And as the higher functioning adult in the household, you have to kind of set that tone. And then, this whole buzzword self-care, I know I use it to nauseum. I think it's so important. And so let's kind of bring that word back in right now because we needed it last year, but we definitely are needing it this year as well. So what are you looking at when you talk about self-care? Because I know one of the entry points I'm talking about to nauseam with everyone in my practice is joy and pleasure. Find some fun, find some joy and pleasure. We're taking everything that's happening around us seriously, but it's okay to take moments away from that and just laugh.
Absolutely. And I like what you just said because it's a spectrum of what self-care is. It's not just spa night, that's great. And that's great that you do that. But self-care is also paying attention to things like you said, joy and laughter, but also self-care is things like bodily functioning, hydrating, making sure your breathing is nice and calm, making sure you're moving and you're exercising and your nutrition is good. Those things are self-care too. And what I'm seeing right now, Chris, is not only are people getting rid of joy and laughter in their life, they're going the next step down. They're not even taking care of their bodies and their minds at a basic level. So self-care means putting your body and your mind first, making sure that it is working as well as possible. They are working as well as possible. And then trying to do that as a priority, given the context of all the stuff that's going on. And if you're not doing that, a red flag to step back and make sure that's a part of your life.
I love that. I was watching the news this morning and I'm stealing this. One of the anchors said, right now, because we're home, we're self-isolating, we're doing a lot of sitting. And he said, sitting is the new smoking. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was very powerful. Move your body, stay hydrated, eat food, get outdoors safely. Yeah, that's self-care.
And I like the way you said that, because self-care, again, has this idea that it's just, it's just going to be a spa night, or we're just going to, only talk about joy and happiness. And those things are wonderful and they're important. But I'm watching people sacrifice literally their mental health and their physical health because they're so dialed in that they literally forget about their basic bodily needs. And that also is self-care. If you don't have that, then you can't bring the joy in, and you can't have the higher levels of self-pleasure and self-enjoyment that are so important.
Because we still have a whole year to get through. Still got a whole year ahead of us.
Yeah, you remember when everybody said, I can't wait to 2021.
Bless 2022.
I will say this, and you mentioned the word resiliency, yes. And I just want to emphasize that this is something, we are living through it, and we continue to do it, but you have to think about this as being in it for the long game. And that's why something like self-care and stepping back is important, because the events are not going to end tomorrow. And if we keep waiting for tomorrow for it to be better, then we're going to wear ourselves down. Live your life optimally today and tomorrow and the next day, because you don't know when this thing is going to settle down.
Beautifully said. Dr. Josh Klapow, thank you so much for being a part of our show.
Thank you, Dr. Chris.
Have a great night.
You too.
That's right. We have an entire year to go through, and we're not necessarily sure what's ahead. And so right now we want to be checking in our current mental health. And as Dr. Josh Klapow said, basic needs is a really great place to start. Staying hydrated, looking at the food you're eating, and also getting outside safely, wearing a mask, but getting some fresh air and some sunlight. Got to be looking out for ourselves, and, gentle reminders for those around us as well. All right, let's go to our next guest, Dr. Dan Karlin, psychiatrist, addictionologist, and medical informatician. I love that. How's it going? Welcome to the show.
Doing all right. How are you?
Hanging in there. Strange, tough times, but we're getting through, right?
Yeah, I just got my first dose of vaccine today.
Ah, well done. I'm hoping to get mine possibly next week. How are you doing with symptoms?
Nothing so far, but it's only been 3 hours, so it's a little soon. We'll see. Apparently tomorrow is supposed to be kind of rough.
That's right. Good luck tomorrow. Hang in there. So let's talk a little bit about combat soldiers. So I was looking at the stats. 52% of combat soldiers that have PTSD suffer from nightmares. And it's interesting. I did something with Vanderpump Dog Organization where they help combat veterans get service dogs to help with different functions. And they never talked about the nightmare piece. So when I saw this article talking about some of the new technologies to kind of focus on that, I was kind of intrigued. So just walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. When you said that, I thought maybe you were going to go a different direction, which is to say that there are actually dogs who are trained to help specifically with nightmares. And it's actually the kind of the best analogy for what we do with nightmare is the nightmare trained dog. So we kind of make the watch act like one of those dogs would act. But look, the way we think about PTSD and nightmares has evolved a bit over the past few years. But from a really high level view, the way I tend to think about this is that if people can't escape from the memories of their trauma even while they're sleeping, that creates a really difficult situation where they're having flashbacks while they're awake, nightmares where they're asleep, and there's almost no reprieve from the experience of this trauma.
Yeah, and we're talking about quality of life, right? I think it's easy for some people to maybe localize that to just sleeping time or time at home, but this is something that impacts friends, family members, someone's ability to hold down a job or participate fully in their lives. So it matters. And, you can talk more about just the importance of sleep. So how did this app come to be? It was just born out of the need?
So I wasn't involved at the beginning, but the story that Grady tells and that has been picked up as we've gotten some press around the FDA clearance is that a guy named Tyler, who was studying machine learning and AI, built it to help his dad. He saw that his dad, a veteran, was suffering from nightmares, and he thought, okay, well, if we can detect and interrupt the nightmares, maybe he'll sleep better. And so it really was born out of a family story and someone with a special skill set trying to do some good for his father.
I think that's really phenomenal. I mean, technology, we are really happy to talk about the downsides and the negatives as far as how it impacts relationships and mental health, but I like seeing its use in this way. So am I correct to understand that the app, it works with like an Apple Watch, correct?
That's right. The hardware for this is an Apple Watch. There's an iPhone involved as well, but the phone doesn't do too much. It just sort of serves as the conduit for the data to get back and forth to the watch. And the app lives on the watch and uses the sensors on the watch to detect the onset of the nightmare, and then uses the haptic feedback, the buzzing essentially that you feel on your watch to interrupt the nightmare. So again, kind of at a high level, it's a really simple concept.
Yeah, and this is something that could be applied for other sleep disturbances or disorders, right?
Maybe. So we've tested it. We kind of kept a laser focus on PTSD nightmares, right? We said, look, we've got this thing that we think works. In order to get it to people, we've got to get it through the FDA process. And to do that, you have to do research, right? And you got to do research on specifically the thing you want to get clearance for. So we've been laser focused on PTSD nightmares. We have ideas of other things we might be able to pursue in the future, but we haven't done the work yet to be able to say that we'll actually work in those conditions.
Okay. And for individuals that are combat veterans and want to purchase something like this, where does one go to do so?
Our commercial strategy so far, again, small team, relatively little money taken in to do all this, is again trying to do this in sort of an incremental way.
Okay.
And where we've launched initially is in the VA system. So the hope is that folks who have seen combat are being treated at the VA, and that they are able to ask their VA-based doctor to write a prescription for this. And so far, what we've done for fulfillment there is that the device is acquired through the prosthetics department at the VA. So every VA has a prosthetics department, unfortunately, right? I mean, that's necessary. And they are the ones who are able to fulfill orders for nightwear.
Yeah, beautiful. I like to see where that leads. I'm not someone who's that up on technology, so I'm always kind of the last one to find out. But addictionology, I just wanted to check in on this quickly as well. We're still in the pandemic, God bless, and people are at home, some people with a lot of time on their hands. And so I'm talking a lot to individuals about coping mechanisms. Are you seeing a rise in substance misuse or abuse as a result of drinking during the pandemic?
Yeah, drinking and other drugs. We were already in an opioid epidemic when the current epidemic started, and that has only worsened. There's been reporting and research showing that opioid use has gotten worse during the epidemic for kind of exactly the reasons you've identified. That folks are scared, and they're often alone, and they don't have their usual social outlets, and in many cases, folks don't have the routines that have allowed them to reduce or abstain from the substances that they might be using. So absolutely, we're seeing that, and that there's some real concern too that we're seeing worsening of the suicide epidemic, which of course predated the COVID epidemic as well. So I think the most comprehensive way that I've heard this put is there is going to be a very long tail of a mental health pandemic that follows even the resolution of the COVID.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's what actually drove the creation of this show, just a resource to remind people to pay attention to their chosen cope mechanisms and to track shifts in behaviors, and also talk about resources. And that's just one of the ones I'm trying to bring out more because, we laugh and people talk about the COVID martini and it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and it's like, that's good. And it's okay to find some joy and pleasure in your life, but we also want to come out of this as resilient and with as robust mental health as possible. So heartbreaking to hear what you just said though about what you're seeing as well.
Yeah, and I think for folks who have some experience with substance use, usually they sort of know where their lines are, and folks who particularly who are already in recovery coming into this phase of this sort of situation in the world, it's important to remember that what your lives were before the pandemic may be the same now, or they may be nearer, right? You may be able to engage in less even of whatever that risky behavior is before you encounter some difficulties. So, as always, folks should be attentive, and if you need care or help, one upshot of the change in healthcare during the pandemic is that there is a tremendous availability of telemedicine available and telepsychiatry. so that the barriers to accessing psychiatric care may actually be a bit lower now than they were before the pandemic. So, when people are able to reach out, find someone to talk to, make sure you're bouncing your ideas about how much substance is okay for you off of somebody who's got your best interests at heart.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I love that. I was someone who, when this happened, was never a fan of telemedicine. It didn't feel the same as sitting in my office with someone, but it's been phenomenal, and the work has been more powerful than I could ever have imagined. So yes, please take use of that. And at the end of the show, we also will put up some resources. Dr. Dan Karlin, thank you so much for being a part of our show.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for talking about combat veterans and PTSD. And we just hope that Nightwear can be a small part of helping to get folks sort of put back together and sleeping well. And with good sleep, everything else seems to get better too.
100%. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night.
Take care. You too.
Bye-bye. All right. So again, we want to make sure that we're reaching out and accessing the resources we need. As Dr. Dan Karlin said, telemedicine is available, and it's also far more beneficial than we could have imagined. So make use of that. And also for those that want even more support, 12-step programs are also putting meetings online as well, anonymous, confidential, however you need them. And we're going to put some more resources up at the end of the show. As always, y'all, thanks for hanging out with me. Focus on self-care, some joy, pleasure, and a whole lot of rest. And enjoy the rest of your night.